Thanks for having me here today. All right. Mental health first aid. It's an 8-hour evidence-based training. It's empirically backed, and I hope that it's going to be the biggest public health initiative since CPR. Many years ago, CPR was instituted, and how many of you here have taken the CPR course? Mental health first aid is very much like CPR. It teaches how to recognize early warning signs and symptoms and how to practice reaching out to someone who might be experiencing a mental health crisis or a mental health concern. Like Jack said earlier, 1 in 4 people will experience something that would bring a crisis upon them. And mental health first aid teaches people to be able to reach out to friends or relatives or family members and provide that initial help that's needed, much like CPR when you provide the airway, breathing, and compressions to keep someone alive. Mental health first aid teaches tools to help someone who's experiencing a crisis, and we have lots of resources that you leave the class with so that you're armed with information to help someone. Each class is 8 hours, and I have copies of the manuals. When you leave the class, you get a manual, and at the end of every chapter are national resources, and then we have oodles of information over there for local resources for you. You know, as a society, we don't hesitate to reach out to somebody who's coughing or sneezing and say, gosh, you need to go to the doctor and get on an antibiotic. But I think that we need to do a much better job in reaching out to someone who's clearly suffering either from anxiety or depression or whatever is causing them stress, and be able to recognize that and offer help. The World Health Organization ranks mental illness the biggest health problem in the United States, and that's over and above heart disease and cancer combined. So we need to start talking about mental illness, and I think that there's a big push in the state of Pennsylvania for integration of physical health and mental health, and I think that you're going to see a lot of that. You may find that your primary care physician is going to start to ask you questions, hopefully. So mental health is offered to a person who is developing a mental health crisis, and it's first aid given until the appropriate treatment can be received or until the crisis resolves. It originated in Australia in 2001 and came to the United States in 2008. There are 2 separate courses. There's an adult course, which is meant for anyone, lay people in the community, to attend and learn what are the warning signs. The adult course focuses a lot on the signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, psychosis, substance use. The youth course is designed for people who have contact with adolescents. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is the onset of most mental illnesses happens around the age of 14. So to be able to recognize some of those early warning signs and intervene is vitally important. The 4th bullet point there, it's included in SAMHSA's National Registry of Evidence-Based Practices. This is a great feat to be listed on that. There are 3 quantitative and 1 qualitative study that show that by taking a mental health first aid class, it can improve your own mental health, it can reduce stigma, it increases understanding of mental health disorders, and in the adult class, we really do spend a lot more time talking about the specific disorders, whereas in the youth class, we talk about recognizing early warning signs and how to intervene, and the class is really interactive. It gives you the opportunity to go through scenarios as a group, and you can work together to decide how best to respond. I think it's worth noting that there are additional courses that my colleague and I are both qualified to teach, and those are supplements for higher education. And we had the opportunity to do 1 class here at Penn State last year because I think that when you're a student and you're just entering this, there are so many stressors, financial stressors and academic stressors, and some of the illnesses, specifically substance use disorders, occur at this age. There's also supplements for higher education, and for veterans, and we are qualified to teach all of those. You learn risk factors and warning signs of mental health concerns, information, like I said, on depression, anxiety, trauma, psychosis, and substance use. Most importantly, just like the ABCs in CPR, you learn an action plan on how to respond. And the action plan is algae, and as it originated in Australia, they have a little koala bear that they use as their mascot, and his name is Algae, and we'll go on to the action plan here in a little bit. Also, we supply you with evidence-based professional peer and self-help resources. The last step in the action plan is vital to recovery, and Jack talked about recovery earlier, and it's a process in which people are able to live, work, and learn, and participate in their community fully. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are without symptoms and you don't see your doctor and you don't take your medication. It just means that you're able to manage your illness. Much like diabetes, you take your insulin, you watch the way that you eat, same principles. One startling fact that I'd like to tell you about, mental illnesses can be mild, moderate, or severe. And 6% of adults who suffer from severe and persistent mental illness report that they had an average of 88 days a year that they were too ill to carry out their daily activities. 88 days a year, that's over 3 months. That's startling. So we need to be able to recognize that and reach out and help people. The action plan. Assess for risk of suicide or harm. This is the most important step. If you feel that there's a likelihood that someone is contemplating that, you have to act. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you ask someone, are you thinking about suicide, that you're actually going to plant that seed in their head, and that is tragically wrong. By asking the question, it opens up the discussion. It's sometimes a relief for someone to be asked that question, because then they have the opportunity to express how they're really feeling. And then that is your opportunity to reach out and help. And then the class teaches you what to do in that case. Some of the things to consider in your risk assessment for suicide. I was talking to a gentleman earlier, I don't know if he's here still or not, he was a veteran, and we were talking about the fact that the most recent data is that 22 veterans die every day by suicide. That's an epidemic. And we're seeing in our community every year, unfortunately, we have to get that data. And every year we're seeing an increase in that. So this is why we have to reach out and start to talk about this so that we can bring those numbers back down. Some of the things to consider. Sex. Actually, males are 4 times more likely to complete suicide. Conversely, females make more attempts. Would anybody like to venture a guess as to why that is?
Males are more into guns.
Often choose more lethal means. Age comes into play. Adolescents and older adults are more likely to think about suicide. Someone who suffers chronic physical illnesses, someone who has been using drugs or alcohol, significantly increases the likelihood that they might take that step. If someone had had a previous attempt, or if you ask them, are you thinking about suicide, your very next question is, do you have an organized plan? And if they do, you know you're in a crisis situation. The next step is to listen non-judgmentally, and this is all about attitude and humanity. And I saw a little snippet on the news yesterday, a photo that came out of Canada of a student who was getting onto a really crowded bus, and someone reached out, and he thought he was reaching to shake his hand. And the student grabbed the guy's hand, and he pulled him and sat him down next to him, and he clearly was having a very difficult time. The bus was really busy, and the student held his hand for the entire 30-minute ride. And then this young man's family, someone took a picture of it, and it's gone viral. Look it up if you can, if you get a moment later. It was out of Canada, and I think it's under Bus Ride. at any rate, he reached out and he helped that young man make it through that. And it's just screamed to me, this is the epitome of what mental health first aid is. So it's that attitude of listening non-judgmentally and reaching out and basically just being human. The third step is giving reassurance and information, and this is not giving advice. This is giving reassurance that I know that there have been other people who have gone through similar events, and I know that they've gone to X, Y, or Z for help. And through the class, you learn all of those X, Ys, and Zs. And on the table over there are lots of resources, and I encourage you to take them. The fourth step is encouraging appropriate professional help. That's reaching out to doctors or psychiatrists or therapists, or if you've heard of peer support, the movement came to the state of Pennsylvania in 2008, and it's a magnificent program with wonderful outcomes that is a wonderful complement to the clinical help that people get. And then the last step is encouraging self-help and other support strategies. And this is what I would encourage all of you to do, is take time every day for yourself. You're busy with your academics and you've got financial stressors and this is going on and that's going on. Always remember to take time for yourself. We talk about the importance of exercise and eating right, relaxation, peer support groups, family, friends, faith, whatever it is that you need to help keep yourself grounded. The next slide, excuse me, talks about when mental health first aid can come into play, and it's from anywhere from wellness to when a person might be having a crisis. So you have a lot of area where you can come in and institute the things that you're going to learn in the class. You might ask, why would I want to take mental health first aid? Like Jack talked about, 1 in 4 people will experience or meet the criteria for a mental health diagnosis in any year. They're very common. 1 in 4, if you look around, 1 in 4 is a quarter of this room could be experiencing something. And I would bet that each and every one of us came here today with something going on, something that we're struggling with, something that we're dealing with outside of our school and our work and our family. Jack talked about reducing stigma, and I think by getting out there and doing this training and providing education and arming people with information, it automatically will reduce stigma. Professional help isn't always at hand, and on average, people wait 10 years from the onset, from their very first recognizing that they're having symptoms. They wait 10 years on average before they actually reach out to get help. I want to put a little plug in for